Hello everyone, welcome to Phone Arena. And I'm sure you've been dealing with a lot of spam calls and scam calls in India. And this is a problem in not just India but globally. And one of the companies at the forefront of this fighting this battle is Truecaller, which is one of the world's most popular caller ID and spam detection and spam blocking apps. So here we are today with two folks from Truecaller. That's Hitesh, a good friend of mine, um, Hitesh Raj Bhagat, who leads communications for Truecaller, and we also have Nakul Kabra, who leads the iOS efforts at Truecaller, who's traveled from Sweden to India. So we managed to get them both for this podcast. So yeah, so over to you guys. You can introduce yourself and welcome to the Phone Arena podcast.
Thanks a lot, Varun, and thanks for having us here. We were, I think, just really excited about this whole new app launch and wanted to talk about it. A quick introduction. I head comms for Truecaller, but we are here ready to talk about iOS. So let's not waste time. Nakul, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Hitesh. Thank you. And thank you, Varun, for hosting me. My name is Nakul, and I am the product director for Truecaller iOS app.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into tech and making apps? I think you've been making apps and building apps for a very long time. So where did you study? How did you get into the
Yeah,
whole uh,
that's
development and
yeah,
all that? Yeah.
that's right. No, so I think my journey into tech is probably a bit cliche, where I got into engineering largely because a lot of my friends were getting into engineering and I had
Mhm.
some inclination towards it. But right after engineering, I in fact met a friend of mine who just returned from the US with an iPhone, and this was 2010. And seeing that phone really motivated me to do something for iPhones, for mobiles, and that's how I got into iOS development. And I started working with a agency in Pune who were building iOS apps back then for for other companies. And through them, I learned most of the things that I've learned, and we built a bunch of apps, some really amazing apps, and my obsession for iOS continued growing from there.
Interesting. So you were previously with Haptic, right? So and Paytm as well. I think the travel, Paytm travel. So how was your experience there? Because Haptic, I think, I think got picked up by Geo recently as well. So very interesting product company. So I'd love to hear what they were up to.
Right. Yeah, so my I joined Haptic in its very early days, and as an iOS developer, I built the one of the first versions, and which was a great experience. And again, Haptic was also growing, and within Haptic, I evolved as a person, as a professional. I started off as an iOS developer. I then went into backend development, and I then went into engineering management. So it gave me a good experience of wide spectrum of things that you could do within engineering. And post haptic, I did join Paytm. At Paytm, I worked on two products. One of them was the Paytm Smart Retail, the POS machines that you see when you make payments, and also Paytm Travel, specifically Paytm Hotels, on how can we enable users to book hotels via Paytm. So both of those journeys were great. Because these were very product focused companies. My previous background was a lot more in building apps for other companies, and in a product company you need a different product mindset. So that journey through haptic and Paytm also helped me grow as a product thinker, which eventually came quite handy for me later in my career.
So when did Truecaller happen and how did it happen?
Yeah, so Truecaller happened in 2019. I was looking out for some opportunities, and a friend of mine, common friend, I would say, like connected me to the co-founders. So I spoke to Nami, one of the co-founders, and Nami was happened to be in India. So we had a chat. We started talking about what we could do more at Truecaller beyond Truecaller, and this role seemed very interesting because we wanted to set up a new team that focuses on new products at Truecaller, and I really had like I wanted to work with a company who can give that creativity, who can give that freedom to go build new products at Truecaller. So that's how I eventually ended up choosing Truecaller, and I landed in Sweden in December 2019.
Wow, that's a
Formed
cold time of the year, yeah, to be there.
Yeah, yeah, it indeed was. In fact, when I left from India, the only thing that I was worried about was the cold. But when I
Okay.
landed there, I realized that cold is okay. It's the darkness which is a bit
Okay.
of a bigger struggle.
Mhm. So that was not, I mean, it was not iOS at the time you joined Truecaller. It was about the product. So one of the, I
Yeah,
think Guardians was one of the apps you worked on, I believe.
that's right. So in fact, when I joined, we it was a complete clean slate. We didn't have an idea of what to build and what the process was to figure out how can we take the values of Truecaller and apply it in different areas, right? When it comes to safety and communication, how could we apply these values in other areas? And one area which we thought was quite relevant and needed some focus was women's safety, right? Like markets like India and a bunch of other markets as well, Middle East, Southeast Asia, South America, women's safety is a big issue. And like what we wanted to do is the way Truecaller helps you in the online world, protects you from spam and scam. We wanted to build something for the offline world where we can protect you from real life dangers, harassment or any of those kind of problems. So we built Guardians with that idea. It's a simple location sharing app for your family. It's not just location sharing, it shares context of where you are, what is your phone status. So if your phone is on low battery mode, or if your phone is dead because of low battery, your family gets to know that you're not reachable because you're out of battery. And that product was great. We launched it in 2021, and it went on to get Google Play Best of 2021 awards in India in 2021.
Nice. Great. So Hitesh, can you throw some light on the user base of Guardian, like across platforms? So I think you're collaborating with the government also on some initiatives as well.
I think those two things are separate, Varun. I mean, there's been, of course, initially we did a significant amount of push for Guardians. We even had like a link to download Guardians because obviously we had to let people know about it. So we had a link for that within the Truecaller app that, this is Guardians. And we wanted to deliberately keep it as a separate app because there was some feedback that, why don't you just incorporate this into Truecaller? But then we didn't want to dilute what Truecaller was already doing. There were already a lot of features within Truecaller, and sometimes people get overwhelmed because, and especially if you look at the Android app of Truecaller, there is a lot of extra functions and features that you can really delve deep into the settings and all that. So decision was made. Guardians will be separate. It's going to be cross compatible. So you could be on iOS, you could be sharing location with others who could be on Android, and vice versa. The government collaborations side of things is different. There's actually a lot of collaborations, road shows, education, consumer education, those kind of things that we've been doing from the government side. And we could talk about a bunch of them. That's a whole separate podcast. But I'll give you a quick example, right? Because there's something that we have all collectively gone through, which is COVID.
Hmm.
And around the time of the second wave of COVID, when things were really bad and a lot of folks were falling ill, severe shortages of hospital beds, of remdesivir, of oxygen concentrators, a whole new type of scam came up around that time. And in fact, I was the one who received the call from the Ministry of Home Affairs. And they realized that it's such a huge issue that we need to do something. So they called up and they said, what can we do? Can you help us? Can we help each other? Ultimately, help the consumer. And so that's what we sort of came up with together with the ministry, that they would share with us the latest numbers on a daily basis. They were sharing hundreds of phone numbers with us on a daily basis where FIRs were being registered against scammers trying to take advantage of people at their most vulnerable. And then we were taking those FIR registered phone numbers and marking them as COVID scams. So that's how, just an example of how we work with the government to
Interesting.
solve a very real problem.
Interesting. So this too, again, you said, I mean, it just brings me back to the what Truecaller mainly does is about caller ID and spam and scam identification. So give us a kind of when your user base keeps growing. I mean, scams and scams keep growing. The user base also keeps growing. So what? How many users use Truecaller on a daily basis? So
So we have, of course, all of our numbers are public because we're a publicly listed company. And if you go to our corporate website, you can actually see, even the results, financial results, user numbers. So we are at about 433 million users globally. roughly around 300 million of those are in India. So it is, of course, by far our largest market, India, but there is growth happening in a lot of other countries as well. And typically the growth ties into, countries that have a lot of spam and scam, and they're dealing with people, consumers that are dealing with it. And when they face this, they're looking for ways to solve the problem. So that's the first point of entry. You also need to look at the Android historically, the Android versus iOS split. So typically in developing nations, there tended to be much more of Android as compared to iOS. And this is again an interesting, aspect. I personally have fielded questions from folks who maybe were Truecaller users on Android and then they switched. That's a typical journey that you switch from a lower cost Android device, and then as you move up, you earn more money or whatever, and you aspire to own a slightly better, more flagship device. You might move to an iOS, an iPhone. So the difference for them was very the performance difference for Truecaller was very stark, and then they would try to ask us, or sometimes people would outright blame us that you guys are not doing enough for iOS users, and those queries and comments have come in historically a lot.
Basically, your Android user base is probably on the larger side. I mean, actually, I mean, the market itself is structured in a way where you have majority of use. I mean, most apps of most users are on Android. iPhone is still a smaller market. It's growing in India, which is a big market. Like you said, it's the bulk of your audience, and for us as well. And so you actually redid the iOS app uh, like a couple of years ago, and
Yeah,
so why was that decision internally? I've seen Alan and Nami. I mean, mainly Alan talk about the iOS app and why it's important and how it's changing. So, how was the reception to the first version of? Well, I mean,
right.
you did a relaunch after a long time. I mean, iOS most of the time the iOS app has been. I mean, it's been what two? It's been around since the time Truecaller existed, right? The iOS app,
Exactly.
it right from
Exactly.
the Symbian and from the App Store. I think it's fascinating how you've been on all platforms since the initial days. So, Nakul, we can just tell us a little bit about your uh, kind of iOS development journey, especially at Truecaller. So,
Right.
what were you
Right.
dealing with when you moved away from the Guardian app,
Yeah.
to focus on the iOS app, I believe, to retool it. So it's been, good 4 years in making the latest release.
No, that's absolutely correct. So in late 2021, we started focusing on Truecaller iOS
Hmm.
very differently. We put a major focus and decided to invest a lot more time and energy towards making the Truecaller iOS product as good as it can be. And in 2022, in fact, in a mere few months, we completely rewrote the app from scratch and we released a brand new version with a full focus on caller ID. We just wanted to make sure that caller ID is as good as it can be, and we launched that product. It was very well received by users. Our overall identification grew almost 10x with that particular update, and it pretty much put us on a good path of growth on iOS. And we continued focusing on that, and we pretty much dedicated ourselves to making sure that one way or the other we need to make sure that caller ID works on iPhone, because users do get spam calls and it's not
Hmm.
very convenient to miss calls or like search for the number while the call is still ringing and so on. So, so yeah, the update that happened 3 years ago, it was almost 3 years ago, I believe, 2022. Yeah, that pretty much was a major event in the life of Truecaller iOS.
So this was using CallKit, right, which was more of an offline database. You were
That's
storing the numbers and doing the lookup.
that's
So
correct.
that's something. Yeah. So that's something that's happened in 22. I think. Uh, Again, I think, but India, I think, gives you a new curveball, right? The number of spammers keep growing every day. I keep getting spam
Yeah,
calls so often. I mean, I've been frustrated to the point that should I move out of my iPhone to an Android? So because Truecaller
yeah,
works better on Android, especially with the auto block and all those features, we'll come to that in a bit. So, I mean, I see you're wearing a Apple shirt. I think this was a one from WWDC last year.
that's correct.
So, so how was WWDC? How was the experience? And talk. And how is it developing for Apple? I mean, what would you tell to somebody writing apps or working or aspiring to be an engineer,
Right,
building out? I mean, that is AI can write code, all that is happening, but you need to at least know what to do, right? Use AI for.
right.
So, what would be your what's been your journey, and what would you like to share with people like to get into this whole app business?
Right, right. I think personally for me, I used to start building apps for iOS from iOS 3. So right
Hmm.
from 2010, I've been pretty much
Nice.
watching every WWDC with a lot of keenness. No, we used to wait for it. Like we know that okay,
Hmm.
on this specific day it's going to happen. Gather together with all friends, colleagues,
Nice.
and wait for it. And it was a very special event every year for us, and then even if we were experiencing it from miles apart, we used to still feel touched by every new product that Apple launched. So in that sense, I was always keen to go to WDC. And last year, I did get the opportunity. I was super excited, and when I landed there, the day one, there's a meet and greet, and I was so surprised by the welcome that the Apple team does for all the developers. They really celebrate the developers, and as a developer, as an attendee to that event, you feel so special for having been there. You really get touched by uh, the awe of Apple, right? The magic of Apple, because it's not just their products like iPhone, Mac, and AirPods, but even their offices, their spaces are so well designed. They're so good, and you feel in a nice space when you're there. Like the motivation levels are extremely high. You meet a lot of other developers, other folks who have exactly had the same story as you have. You get to meet them, you get to speak to them, which again feels very special.
Nice. Yeah, I've attended WWDC once, and yeah, I can kind of relate to a lot of what you said. And my favorite thing was meeting developers. There were some really young developers, like not even 18, like kids in
Yeah,
school who were building apps. So when I attended WWDC, I'm sure Hitesh has also been to few back in his journalist days. Uh,
I was there when the new park opened, so I was there for the inauguration.
that's a big one.
That's a big one, yeah. So that's I think I still miss the old one Cupertino campus though. So that used to be quite smaller campus, but they used to never do events there. It used to be only visits, and I mean the events used to happen elsewhere, but now they do it there itself. But yeah, I think WWDC, I think I mean they went fully online, and then this was the first, I think last couple of years it's been offline. So this was your first ever WWDC you attended in person.
That's correct.
Interesting. And it was actually very interesting to see also Truecaller mentioned in the Apple official developer portal, newer lookup framework as well. I
Right.
think
Yeah.
Truecaller was mentioned
Yeah.
about that. So what is
Yeah.
exactly you're doing with the new framework and the different, yeah.
Yeah, so of course, live Caller ID Lookup, as the framework is called, came out in iOS 18, and it does the document does mention that it's built for apps like Truecaller to leverage that and provide real-time call identification. And the way this framework works is the like with Truecaller, if users enable this particular extension, when they get a phone call, your phone could check Truecaller servers to get the caller ID information in real time, which is a huge change from the current approach, which was more offline. That there are offline lists which used to show you caller ID, and now there will be online lookup which will show you caller ID. And of course, on the online lookup, it can take the full power of a database and identify a lot more calls. And it's not just limited to identification; it also does blocking based on that. So if you get a call from a number which is spam, and if you've chosen to block spam calls, we could block spam calls for you by doing a live lookup, and all of this happens in a flash of a second.
Yeah, I think I've been enjoying the latest update because my phone doesn't ring as much as before because I think I've turned on auto block on. And sometimes it is, especially on a Monday morning or on a Saturday morning, that's when the spammers are crazy active, and barely some calls slip through. Maybe newer numbers which are not flagged yet. This is amazing that auto block, which is on Android. I mean, it works almost as effectively on iOS now, and it's like so good. I mean, to have that feature, because otherwise I would have to do the. I mean, previously I had to do the clipboard. I mean, search on clipboard or search share on Truecaller, use a Siri shortcut, and also tap the side button. I mean, all that was, I think, a little bit of extra step you had to do to get. I mean, I think you've tried, so you can just talk about that as well, right? How did you get here? I mean, the iOS itself has evolved, but
Right.
before that, you did try some tricks to crack this, just using the call kit and.
So in fact, I mean, the story, like you said, like it goes back all the way to 2009. Truecaller
Mhm.
has existed on iPhone since 2009, and uh, like on day one, it didn't have native caller ID and spam blocking support as it has on other platforms, or as it had on other platforms, and which meant that we had to find different ways of making that work, or different ways of bringing that value to users. That if, especially with spam calls, that if they get a call from a spam number, they need to know that it's a bad actor. Like, please don't pick up. So we started out with things like saving a bunch of spam numbers into a contact into your phone book, so that if you get a call, the phone picks up from your phone book and says it is spam, right? Which is a great way to at least protect you from the top spammers or top fraudsters and so on, so that even if you're not able to identify all the calls, at least the bad calls are kept away from you, which was a great start. But again, it wasn't very effective because you can't save thousands of numbers in the phone book, right? So we kept evolving. We later we introduced something called call alerts, where when you get a call from another Truecaller user, what we can do is we can send a push notification with the name of the person who's calling you, and that also becomes like a caller ID, that you get a phone, your phone starts to ring, and immediately you get a push notification. But again, this was great but not effective, because not all people who call you are calling from Truecaller, right? And then eventually in 2016, Apple introduced CallKit, which was the first native support for caller ID. So we were like probably one of the first ones who started using that, leveraging that, and built caller ID support using that, which expanded the overall coverage of the amount of calls we could identify. And then through the years, as CallKit evolved, as we also evolved, we kept improving on that, which eventually in 2022 revamped the app. Then CallKit was also very highly evolved, so we decided to leverage it as much as possible to identify as many calls as possible. And again in 2023, we realized that with the old call kit approach, it wasn't enough. Users need an ability of identifying calls in real time, and which is when we made use of Siri shortcuts and app intents, and gave the opportunity of using action button or back tap or speaking to Siri. But again, like these were great things, but were not exactly hitting the right spot in terms of how caller ID should be. Which now with the new live caller ID lookup, it's a very native experience. It's a very clean experience. If your phone starts to ring, like you said, if it's a spam call, your phone won't even ring, which is a great peace of mind. And if it's not a spam call, your phone rings and it shows your name as naturally as other calls you get. So the whole experience is blend very well into the rest of iOS experience.
You mentioned iOS 18, but only after iOS 18.2 is the new live caller ID enabled on Truecaller. So, I mean, can you tell us a little bit more why 18.2 and what was different in
Right.
18.2?
Yeah, no, you're indeed right. The framework support exists from 18.0, and but we decided to build this feature from 18.2 because there are few more enhancements in 18.2 and onwards, which make the whole feature a lot more reliable and stable, which is why we have kept it from 18.2 and onwards.
Apple support for caller ID has evolved over the years as well, from not allowing third-party support from initial days to now they are, I mean, allowing access to third-party developer, even featuring you in their documentation, which is amazing. And but I mean, coming to the Apple world, I mean, privacy is they bet very highly on privacy. And you did mention about some encryption and the data transmission which happens between the phone, I mean, the numbers and the data, because a lot of users, have this concern about the data, how is it shared? So, I mean, I'm sure you're using some techniques like private relay and all that. So, how is the data transferred between, like, say, when I get a spam call or even a genuine call from a bank or something? How is the data transferred or looked up?
Right. So in fact, the live caller ID lookup, it uses one of the latest and greatest privacy preserving techniques to make sure that the whole calling activity remains private. So there are three main concepts. If you can allow me to go a bit more in technical details, one is called private information retrieval. It's basically a brand new way of doing database lookups without knowing what is being looked up, right? So a traditional database lookup, you have a query, it will look up and give you a response, but the query has to be like it should be known like what to query. So with a new update with private information retrieval, we the database doesn't know what is being looked up, but can still give what is being looked up. So it's almost magical, and this is a brand new technology called homomorphic encryption, and Apple has recently open sourced this in Swift, and we are using that to make sure that the database lookups are completely private. But beyond that, we also use something called as privacy pass protocol, which basically makes sure that only legitimate Truecaller users can use this service. And also we use private relay. So all the requests to our servers come via private relay, making sure that they are all legitimate requests. So it uses a combination of all these three technologies to make sure that the calling the calling activity is fully private.
Nice. So it's mostly, it would be kind of anonymized by the time it hits your server. So you don't, you know, it's an authentic request, but you don't know the nature of the, I mean, you know the nature of the data, but you don't know the actual data. That's also encrypted and it's anonymized. So you wouldn't know the origin. So, but still you're able to work with this and let the user know if it's spam or not. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Also talk about, I was just thinking as Nakul was talking about typical user behavior when it comes to spam calls. And increasingly, we got a lot of reports, I mean, folks writing into us on social media and things like that, wherein the typical user behavior changes sometimes when you move from Android to iPhone. In which
Yeah.
case, in the previous versions, when you did not have as much of a caller ID and blocking performance available on iPhone, the typical user behavior changed to not answer unknown calls at all.
Yeah,
And
just use the
the
silence button. Yeah.
just silence it, cut the call, whatever. But the issue with that is let's say we, as an example, as a nation, the entire nation, all business, it all runs on phone
On
calls.
phone calls. Yeah. We
We
can't keep
need,
to
yeah,
ignore
we,
calls.
we need to answer those calls. We need to answer e-commerce calls, deliveries, cabs. It could be a business calling you, it could be a school, a chemist. So that's where the whole business angle, legitimate business is also trying to contact you. You're not going to be saving those numbers in your phone book.
Yeah.
But we also don't want people to miss something that's important to them. And that's why the caller identification bit is so important. So I just thought it's important to mention.
Yeah, it makes sense because I also want to reminds me that one of your taglines for Truecaller is take the right call, right? So
Exactly.
ignore the, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd rather take genuine calls than take, like, waste my time with real estate spam, credit card spam, and all that nonsense. And sometimes it's, like, I remember this was when I was on Android. I think this was probably 10 years ago. I was applying for a visa. I think this was for, I think something for travel to Shenzhen for China. And I applied and I had forgotten about it. And then I was traveling somewhere. I couldn't really take that call. I was in a meeting. It says Embassy of China. Call is coming from there. And I'm like, why is the embassy even calling me? And I'm like, okay, they wanted some additional documentation for the visa application. So yeah, so if I had refused to take the call, I mean, if I had uh, cut it or ignored the call, I would have just,
You would have missed an opportunity that was
yeah.
important to you.
Yeah.
So I think I totally understand. I mean, why you can't really. I mean, a lot of people instantly suggest on iOS silence unknown callers. It just doesn't work, especially in today's day and age, where even your Swiggy or Uber or the bank or whoever or your family is trying to call you, and sometimes they might call you from a different number or a different. I mean, that again puts in a different perspective because scammers are operating also in a different fashion now. So I think you can't really escape from not having. I mean, by not taking calls, I think that's a very difficult route to ignore calls unless you are somebody who has a secretary or can afford to have somebody attend your phone calls. I think you need to attend, right? So I think that way, I think iOS has been lagging quite a bit compared to Android, especially on the caller ID piece. And I mean, I still, I'm invested in the iOS ecosystem because iPhone, AirPods, and I mean, the Mac and everything. So I still can't move completely to Android. So that way, I think I was really. I mean, the update which came out in 22 was good, but still, I think wasn't like you said. There were limitations in how the tech was built and the whole stack. But now I think it's a lot better. I think the hit rate is. I'm seeing a lot more calls ringing. I mean, it shows the Truecaller badge with respect to the name. So, is there still some limitation in just because the spammers are operating faster than you updating the database? Is that the reason we don't see some numbers being flagged?
Yeah. I think, I mean, of course, the whole database for this iOS caller ID is different from the Android database. So
Mhm.
we try to keep both of them in sync, and you should ideally see all calls being identified. But there are situations where some number which is very freshly reported as spam could miss, and this
Mhm.
is something which we closed in quite well in the last few weeks. But it's of course, like, we are also in the early days of our feature. We'll keep optimizing this, we'll keep improving this as this scales up. So eventually it should not be the situation that if there's a result available on Truecaller, that should be available to you in the caller ID. There should be no difference between what you see in caller ID versus what you see when you manually search on Truecaller.
This happens where the number is not showing anything, but when I do a manual lookup, it does show some number. Maybe like you say, it's a recent tag on somebody has tagged it recently. So yeah, that's something. But opinion, I mean, I think probably is the iOS caller ID on par with the Android caller identification currently with the latest update.
Yeah, I actually just want to quickly go back to the previous question and let also know one more thing, that it's possible that sometimes Truecaller has no information on a particular number, which is why there's no caller
Agree.
ID. You might be probably the first person who received the call from that number, and in those cases, we would rely on you to mark spam so that we can start flagging that to others when others start receiving calls. So we'll
I
in
do that all
fact,
the time. I do that all the time. I mean, especially when I get a
yeah,
notorious call, I just make sure I report it, block it, report it on Truecaller, then
that's
block it on
great.
iOS,
Absolutely,
so that I never
yeah.
get to hear from them again.
We
So yeah, but
Yeah, we'll in fact make it much easier for you to report it directly from your call log. I believe right now you report
mhm.
from Truecaller app, but
Our app,
we'll soon have a better way for you to report directly from your call log.
nice. That will be
Actually, that
brilliant
brings me
because
to something as well. I wanted Nakul, if you could also spend some time on the integration with the call log and even the recent numbers, because that itself was a big pain point
yeah,
for Truecaller users on iOS.
Yes, I think so. In fact, I don't know if this was iOS 17 or 18, where the list of number of calls that you
100.
show up in call log,
It was.
it has changed from 100 to 2000.
Oh
So
wow,
right
okay.
now it is 2000 calls. And plus in iOS 18, you can now search in those calls. So if you had received a call 6 months ago, which at that point Truecaller identified that as Hitesh, and you had not saved the number, you could just go into search and search for Truecaller or search for Hitesh, and it will point you back to that call from 6 months ago, provided it's in your call history of 2000 calls. So that's a pretty nice
Nice.
way of going back to previous calls, especially if you did not save the number or if you had no reason to save the number. So that's a great improvement. Plus, on the call log as well, I do want to talk one more thing about it, where a lot of users ask us the question that, do you have access to my call log, or why does call log not show up in my Truecaller app? So I
Yeah.
do want to clarify that the call log or the whole calling activity is happening in the phone app, which is your default dialer, right? Truecaller is not a dialer. Truecaller is an extension to the dialer. Truecaller will provide data for all the numbers that you have in the dialer, be it in the incoming call or in the call log and so on. But your call log remains in your phone app, and Truecaller, you can come and search for numbers. It can power the caller ID, but these two apps are different, and these two concepts are different.
Nice. So, I mean, coming to the lookup method, right? So you said had a Colkit database you're looking up locally, but the newer method is probably hitting your servers and going through encryption and all that. So is there a slight delay in seeing the name or the lookup, uh, like a latency or some sort?
Right. I think the database lookup itself is extremely fast. We have been able to keep it super fast even at the scale of the size of our database. And in most cases, like both for blocking and for caller ID, within a flash of a second, given again, this depends on the user's internet speed as well.
Mm-hmm.
On a good internet, within a flash of a second, you should see the caller ID information.
Mm-hmm.
And in cases if you have a weak internet or a slow internet, the phone will start ringing without showing you the name, but in a few seconds, whenever the name is available, it will replace the number by name and show you the actual name. So it really depends on the user's internet speed as well. But from a database lookup perspective, that's extremely fast. We have to keep it within a second, because if you don't keep it within a second, then the blocking feature won't work. For blocking, it has to respond back within a second.
Thanks, brilliant. So the new, the call blocking or the live caller ID, all these features, I believe are part of the premium plan. If you're a premium Truecaller user, is when the full functionality works on iOS. Is it correct?
That is correct. So maybe I can talk a bit more about what is premium and what is free. So on iOS, you can look up numbers for free. It's ad supported. You might see ads, but you can look up numbers for free, and you will get calls from businesses that are available for free. So if you're expecting a call from food delivery or a courier and so on, you will see caller ID for those calls. All other calls, like spam calls, calls from unknown folks, and all of that is behind a subscription. You need to be a Truecaller Premium subscriber to get caller ID for the rest of the calls. And of course, if you want to block spam calls, then that definitely is behind a subscription as well.
So yeah, so that's your pitch. Like I think premium is the best version of the product,
Yeah.
right? So that's
No,
what
I
it is. So,
think
and it's like 99 rupees in India is the pricing, and you get like you can get a family plan or a yearly plan as well, right? And is the family plan, does it work on iOS as well? I think Hitesh probably on this. Does the family plan support iOS as well?
No, so the
Or
family
sharing?
plan, exactly right, because the family plan was completely in response to user demand that there was a section of people who felt that, either this is too expensive, I need more affordable options. So we had launched, for instance, fraud insurance, and this was put in as part of premium. So when uh, fraud insurance was launched, we said, no, we must include it as part of family as well. So even though you can take family user and add four more people to it, right? They could be anyone, right? They don't need to be necessarily living with you. But then all of those people will also get the benefits, all the benefits of premium, but they'll also get fraud insurance, which we had partnered with HDFC or Go with for this fraud insurance. So the family plan is a great way to add the premium features at an affordable price point. There's also one more thing I was wanting to discuss, if I may, the the whole aspect, and this is again a big pain point for consumers, is calls coming in from other apps, right? Not just your regular phone calls, right? You may have other calling or messaging apps, and that's where Truecaller could possibly help. And maybe Nakul, if you can talk a bit more about the whole full stack nature of it.
right. Now, of course, the calls can happen. I mean, the regular phone calls is one, but you can also get calls on FaceTime, WhatsApp, and other platforms on your device. And the way the live call lookup works, and even the call kit works, is if you're getting a call, it does look up onto your servers, onto our servers to find a caller ID for those calls as well. So which kind of makes sure that regardless of what types of calls you're getting, Truecaller is in action to make sure that it's protecting you from spam. And it doesn't block WhatsApp call. Like it can block your regular calls. It doesn't block WhatsApp calls per se, but at least it gives you a signal saying that it's a spam call. No, don't pick this up.
Providing the information, the complete information to the consumer, because that's the most important, right? You're empowering a
Yeah,
consumer to make the decision. And this has been a common complaint. And as spammers and scammers evolve, they're moving away from the traditional phone calls into other platforms. But
Yep.
hey, how can Truecaller protect me? Yes, we have the solution. So that's important to know.
Yeah, and also people, when especially you've been in Delhi, so sometimes calls don't go through. So though, especially now, even you're in Uber, you're waiting for a cab, they might tend to call you on WhatsApp. So makes a lot of sense. FaceTime, not as popular in India, but might make
yeah,
sense in other markets. Yeah, I always wanted to understand. I'm just trying to open the call blocking identification. I see these five parts. It was, I think, three when it launched. It's become five now. What does it actually do? Because every time I ask users to tell about users to turn it on or whatever, whenever somebody tells to caller ID is not working for them, I go check this is disabled or they haven't turned it on correctly, or sometimes it's just spinning still. What does it
right.
exactly mean, these badges? Because I see a new badge, it says part five, which is the live caller ID lookup. The rest four parts say caller
The
ID
part five was
identification.
the one that was just introduced, the live caller ID lookup.
Okay. So yeah, if you can,
Nakul can
every,
talk more in detail about that.
Yeah. Now I think so. Of course, those basically everything on iOS is permission based, is user choice based, and when you install Truecaller, you need to give Truecaller the permission, or yeah, the Truecaller the permission to be able to show you caller ID, right? And these settings basically are a way of a user giving permission. And what these settings allow us to do is these settings allow us to pass the caller ID information to your phone app, so that your phone app can show you incoming caller ID or in your call log. So the four parts, they're actually a different combination of things that happen behind those four parts to make sure that it shows you caller ID for spam and various other categories of call. The part five, in fact, is you authorizing your phone to do a lookup onto our servers. So when you enable part five and you're a premium user, you're pretty much giving like authorizing your device to do lookups onto Truecaller server. So it's purely like you can see it as a permission, and like the we use multiple parts because it maximizes what we can identify for you.
it's always been in my head ever since I started using the iOS app. Glad I got it clarified. I think it can be like a question in our, probably when you're doing our meetup, we can do that quiz of sorts where what is this for? People can guess
It's also the
what is it
most
for.
common troubleshooting, right? You, as you
Yeah.
exactly mentioned, that when
Yeah.
somebody's caller ID on their iPhone's not working in the way they're expecting, the first thing to do is go into the iPhone settings, go to
And even
phone, and
yeah,
then
even the
call
settings
blocking, and then
has,
check.
I think the even the I think the path to access this has changed now. And latest iOS 18, I think before it was and phone settings they could access directly. Now you have to go into settings and scroll
Yeah,
down through P and then luckily there's the
Actually,
alphabet.
the
Yes.
app directs you. So if you install the
Mhm.
app, there is a
Yeah,
shortcut
yeah.
that's created.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
making it easier.
and the
Yeah.
fact
So
that this is a setting in the phone app, so if you see, it's not a setting inside Truecaller. Like in the settings
nice.
also,
Yeah.
you go to phone because it's actually a phone setting. It's not a Truecaller setting. So you are actually just giving phone the permission to use data from Truecaller to
Makes
show you
sense.
caller ID.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
just one more thing, you mentioned that you've seen that for some users, the option keeps spinning, for some time. And
Mhm.
it just happens that sometimes when you enable, it has to refresh some of the data, or it has to fetch new information. And that can take anywhere between few seconds to few minutes, in which cases sometimes it might just keep showing a
Interesting.
spinning indicator. But most cases, in a few minutes it should fix itself automatically. You don't need to do anything different for getting it fixed.
So I mean, you said premium, and then so what's coming next? So you have more features coming lined up for premium users on
Yeah,
iOS, because I think you finally cracked the what to say? I would say the fundamental caller ID, which is like caller ID, so problem. So that you've solved. So I mean, would it be possible to like? I mean, I think there is an ability to save contacts from the Truecaller app, or from contacts now from the live call log as well. So what else is coming to Truecaller on iOS in terms of premium features?
right. Yeah, I think, I mean, we have a big focus on our premium subscribers. We have a bunch of interesting features planned. If I can spill the beans, I can talk about one of them, which is series blocking. So what we'll soon allow users to do, premium subscribers to do, is they could define a series of numbers. Like if you see patterns of calls that you get, and if you feel that okay, calls from these particular series, I don't I'm not interested in those calls. Those calls are never important for me. You could block those series so that those series could automatically be blocked on your phone. They'll never ring. So that's something which is in the works and hopefully
Nice.
should be available very
Something is
soon.
similar to Android, right? Android already has the ability to speak some series like
Correct.
telemarketers or particular countries. You
Yeah.
can have the IDD code. Reason spam of calls coming in from some countries I've never really heard of much before. I got a call the other day from Iran, Mozambique, Cameroon. I don't know where these guys are operating. I think somebody's they're misusing these VoIP gateways or whatever, and making these calls. And I've never attended any of these calls, thankfully. But I'm so curious to attend these just to figure out how they operate. But I know that it's sometimes also a reverse charge mechanism, where even you attend the call, you start getting billed up. You maybe premium numbers or some nonsense which they have figured out. But yeah, I think it's great. I mean, that would be, I'm going to block out, I think probably a few banks calling me repeatedly are going to go on the block list soon. And yeah, so
731.
one,
There was
mm,
another, I don't know if you noticed this, but at least personally, and a lot of people I spoke to, there was a lot of calls coming in with the 731 series
mhm.
for some
Yeah, yeah,
reason.
yeah. Axis, I think, and some other, I also got a few calls today. Let me see. It was 731. Yesterday was some 7405 931. These guys are like, the moment you block something, I think they change the series of operations also. So another quick question I had before we when we are working on the new features. I usually I'm plugged into my iPhone when I drive, and I use CarPlay on my car, and after the latest update, I see the caller ID or the true caller, I mean spam or whatever the caller identification is on the call log, but I still don't see it while the phone is ringing. It shows on the phone, but it doesn't
Right.
show on the CarPlay dashboard. Is that
Right.
something we will see change in the near future, or is there any
Yeah.
limitation to showing it on the dashboard?
Right. No, I think that's like probably a feedback to Apple
Mhm.
because the incoming calls screen, like I said, is basically Apple who shows information there, and it's definitely in the works. We have passed this feedback on, and as a user, I would also suggest you to use tools like Feedback Assistant. That's a great way to let Apple know about your feedback, your suggestions, and so on. Definitely, like do pass on that feedback, and we will
Sure,
keep
yeah,
this in.
I'd love to have not want to take calls or look at my phone while driving, so because it comes on the phone. But is it the same logic for the Apple Watch as well? Is that the same
Exactly.
problem? Okay,
So the
Exactly.
because I don't
information
have.
exists. The information exists
Yeah.
in the database. It's being delivered to you in an encrypted format, displayed on the phone. At hopefully in the future there can be some toggles that you enable to show on CarPlay and
Yeah.
Apple Watch.
There's no,
That'll
yeah,
be
there's no need
brilliant.
of toggles either. If it ideally it will start showing automatically. It should
Mm.
just because if you're given the permission on the phone, that is enough for it
Yeah,
to
but I
show
think
in other
it's
places.
yeah, I think it should be good to have it, because but it sounds weird though. Like I mean, I think it's probably it's some design way it's designed. I think it treats it as two separate screens, right? When I take a screenshot
Yes.
when I'm driving, it takes
Yes.
a screenshot of my phone as well as a
Exactly.
dashboard on the CarPlay.
Car.
Same for
Yeah.
watch. If you're trying to do something and your watch is bad, you do get a screenshot of the. If you try to take a screenshot of the watch, you'll probably get a screenshot of the phone as well. That way, I think hopefully this gets fixed soon. And then, I mean, a lot of this is you said you're playing around with so much of data, means of database of spam and fraudulent numbers, and also useful data like from businesses. You have to call up for business and all that. So there's a lot of data. So I'm sure you already are using a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence to process and handle a lot of this data. So could you walk us through how are you doing the spam detection in the back end in terms of assigning a spam score or just before the notification is sent? What exactly happens behind the scenes before you send out that notification saying a likely spam or
Right. Yeah, we do use AI significantly in spam detection, which in fact is the way in which we identify spam even before it is spam. So you might see sometimes calls which say likely spam. So even when we have some signals which tell us that okay, this number is eventually going to evolve into a spammer, we start showing we start showing that it is likely spam much earlier, and that is powered by like being able to look at the calling patterns of that number, like how often do calls go out from that number, and a bunch of other parameters that come into play, which make sure that we are able to be one step ahead of it. Like, so of course users will at some point start reporting spam, submit comments and do all of that, but we need to be available even before that, even before those things kick in. So that's one of the applications of AI, especially in spam identification.
nice. So you mentioned comments. So is it possible to like comment on a particular number in the Truecaller iOS app currently? Can I like write a note?
Yes,
Okay.
you can
I
search
don't.
a number. When you search a number in the app, it allows you to write a comment. So if you've had a
Nice.
specific experience, and again there as well, we have spammers on whose profiles people have put thousands of comments, and we use AI to summarize those comments, understand really what exactly are everyone saying. So if there are a bunch of comments which say something like job fraud, employment fraud, and bunch of these things, to kind of summarize and kind of give a summary of the kind of spammer this person is.
Interesting. So yeah, so I think, but so that data is also shared across platforms. Like you would see,
Yes.
so you do that in the back end in terms of depending on the platform the user is using. Interesting. So I mean, you already mentioned about working. I mean, I think the iOS 18.2 update you released. I mean, the Truecaller app for iOS 18.2 with Caller ID kind of uses all the latest um, technologies which Apple has introduced as part of iOS. So, what are your plans to integrate? I think you already said, I mean, you're doing the best you can to in terms of use the tools available. But are you going deeper into the Apple ecosystem in terms of integration? Like, why don't we see, like, say, a native WatchOS app, for instance,
Uh,
or so something like that? So, what are your thoughts on that? And do you still
yeah.
believe the phone is a central piece to this?
Yeah. No, I think it's again like very early days for us. We've just launched this. It's been a few weeks, and what we'll be doing for the next few weeks or months is picking on this feedback from users, like understanding what are their pain points, what are the different things that we could solve for them. And of course, to whatever extent, like we've already proven that in the last 15 years, even when there was no full support for real-time caller ID as it is right now, we always found ways to make it work. We always found ways to bring that value to users in one way or the other. So we'll continue doing that. And with caller ID and spam blocking working as expected, I feel that we just started to scratch the surface of what we can do on iOS. And we should definitely see a lot more enhancements in the coming months and years.
Great. And yeah, so one of the final questions, so if resources or time or any, say everything is you're in a time machine and you can do something and you can add one more feature to your latest launch, what would it have been?
And I think, and honestly, like we usually always work with that attitude that like
Mhm.
every project or everything that we take up, we challenge ourselves, assuming that let's say we don't have everything that we need to make this happen, and what will we do? But I think specifically to this, our latest launch per se, I would, I would try to figure more. Uh, Efforts into giving more context to the user for each call, right? So for example, like a caller name is good enough to know who's calling, but why are they calling, and what are the number of spam reports, what are the number of comments, like which city are they calling from, and any particular category that others have categorized it as, and so on. Because sometimes the rest of the information is also equally important information to decide whether or not to pick up the call. So if resources were not a constraint, and if technology was not a constraint, we would probably focus a lot more on bringing that context about why you're getting the call.
Nice. Yeah. So that's again, that's a platform limitation. You have a limited real estate you need to work with, right, on iOS. So, but yeah, so I mean, like you said, early days, but yeah, fantastic update. I've been hearing great feedback from most users who asked them to. I think another like last question, like the frequent notion is that iOS users update their OS more often or more frequently than on Android. But are you seeing any similars there, or you want the users to be? I think I don't know. I keep moving on to the beta, so I'm on 18.3 already, but 18.3.1, I'm not sure. So you for this features to work, fundamentally, you need the user to be on iOS 18.2, right? Or else you'll have a
Yeah,
um,
it
not the full good experience with it. So that's
yeah, it has to be 18.2 or newer, because if you're
Mhm.
not on 18.2 or newer, in settings you won't see the part 5 option. The part 5
Mhm.
option is not available if you're not on 18.2 or newer, even
So if
if you're on the
you're
latest, even if you're on the latest version of Truecaller, like, but if you're not on 18.2 or newer, it won't show you the part 5. And to your question about how fast users update their operating system, I think in general, iOS is much faster than Android. I think it's designed at the phone level itself in a way where most users are on auto updates and so on. But it's also not like it's not that fast that the moment a new operating system comes out, it's not that fast that majority of users are on it. It's like a gradual build up towards that version. We still see a lot of users on iOS 15, 16 who haven't updated to 17, 18, and so on, and for different reasons, right? Like everyone might have their own reasons for like why they did not update. Maybe a lot of people don't even know that they need to update and so on. But in
yeah in my
general,
home, yeah, I say I can. I think in my home family, like nobody else wants to update their OS. I mean, they like defer it. It still says download or whatever. So
yeah.
so I think it's just a user preference. But I think I heard similar. I think it's also because the iOS user base is growing. It isn't the small niche user base it was
Mm,
before with a few million users or few
right.
tens of million. Now it's like hundreds of millions of users. Devices also are probably beyond their maybe they don't have get updates anymore from Apple, like maybe
Yeah.
iOS, iPhone 16, 6s or 7. And Japan is an interesting country I went to where people are still using iPhone 5s and the first generation SE and 6s. And 6s is newer actually, 6 or 5s.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't go beyond iOS 15, so or 12 or 15. So challenge. But
Correct.
yeah, I
I
think
I would happily go back to iPhone 4S if iOS 18
the
worked
form
on it.
factor, right?
Oh,
That form
beautiful.
factor.
What a phone that was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it
I've
was
also seen
fantastic.
some cases where folks weren't able to update because of storage issues.
Yeah,
And
嗯
that
64 GB
especially happens
iPhones.
64, 128, folks fill up, and then you need a certain amount of free space in order to do an iOS update.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. That brings us to the end of the podcast. So that was a fascinating insight into iOS development and how Truecaller has evolved on iOS, and also about Truecaller, what Truecaller does. I mean, it's one app I definitely need on my phone, especially for the amount of spam and scams I'm targeted by, especially these days. So thank you, Nakul, for sharing your insights, and look forward to catching up in person soon. And thanks, Hitesh, for your time as well. So it was great having you both. And yeah, see you guys in the next podcast. And thank you guys for watching. If you have any comments or feedback to Truecaller about their iOS app or general about Truecaller, let us know in the comments. And see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.